Hello and welcome to our show. This is Dr. Sylvia Kratzer, and I'm so excited about December, one of my favorite times of the year. I always love to get a head start on the new year, and I'm particularly interested in decluttering, but not decluttering your home, your house, your drawers, your closet, all good, but much more important, as you know, I'm all about story, the story you tell to yourself, to others as your brand, and that creates identity. Reason being, I had worked in Hollywood for many years and was teaching cinema as well at UCLA in Pepperdine, and learned a thing or two about storytelling and the importance that it means for our life, our daily life and our identity. And so many times we tell ourselves stories that never perhaps or no longer work for us. You see, storytelling has been around, of course, since the early times of the cradle of humanity, and is such an integral part of who we are. We not only understand ourselves, who we are as an individual, through storytelling and through the hero, the much used hero's journey, heroine's journey, which I have a completely different take on it, but for our purposes, yes, storylines do tell us who we are, who we can be, who we can become. And also, they help us make sense of our world, just as language is the conduit, the bridge to create meaning out of the world that without words, in a sense, would not make no meaning. But stories even more so package reality into bite-sized ways of understanding the world and ourselves. So, let's talk about the stories you might have been telling you all of your life, and I want to go into 3 different ones. One, the stories that you tell about your past. There might be regrets, there might be stories that anchor you into a particular identity given to you by others, whether family or friends, or even certain failures in your past. And these stories tend to frame us and give us identity. Well, what, instead of making goals and plans for the new year, and underneath it still carrying those old stories around with you that tend to trip you up, perhaps make your goals and aspirations null and void because you carry these stories around with you. What if you could declutter them just like a cluttered drawer? Are there stories in your life that you regret? But let me say something else. When I was a child, I often was peeved by people who said, I have no regrets, I would do everything exactly the way I've done it. And even as a 10-year-old precautious, I said, well, then that means you never learned anything from your life. And I still hold true to that thought. You do need regrets, because regrets are the signposts for us to change who we are, change our story, change direction, and learn. If you never regret anything, you are not a person who reflects back on their own mistakes. And even if you don't regret anything you did in your own life, we all have hurt other people in one way or another. So the regret for that, at the very least, should be something that comes to our mind. But let's not get stuck there. Because more interestingly is when we take those regrets and learn from them, rise above them. See, one of the interesting things is the past, in a sense, is malleable. And yes, in postmodernity, everyone speaks about their truths that's different from other people's truths. And while I've been one of the first to perhaps been writing on this in terms of cinema, how truth is malleable, perception is malleable, changeable. There is, of course, a truth that we have to adhere to. There is an objective truth. But when it comes to our individual truth, recollections may vary, as the famous Queen Elizabeth phrase goes, because in our memory, we may remember one thing and another person remembers that same situation completely different. And the way we've etched it in our memory, it can either be a conduit to help us and grow above, or it becomes a trap that holds us down and moors us, shackles us, ties us to regrets and to failure. But see, I still believe that we have to be aware of our failures and regrets instead of saying I have none. But then how about if you can rewrite them into success stories instead of allowing them to anchor you into the heaviness of the past and never rise above it. So what are 3 of your regrets the last year, the last 5 years, in your entire life? What if you could rewrite it and perhaps step out of who you are from your perspective, but see it from a different perspective? For instance, let's say you have had major losses and you blame yourself for it. There could be losses in health, losses in people, losses in finances. But the loss can also be a stepping stone. So I would recommend you look up perhaps YouTube videos or stories, books against stories, where people have gone through similar experiences of loss and have risen above it, and take them as your story heroine that you can emulate, that you can rethink your own story of loss. Another interesting decluttering your story is the people in your life. Sometimes we have to let go of people, and oftentimes the very people we have to let go of guilt us for doing so. They may have come into our lives as people who veil themselves as victims. They have been the victims of bad friends, of family who were abusive to them, and that's how they present themselves. And so we tend to embrace them and of course want to show them that yes, there are good people out there, there are good friends out there, and that their wounds may be healed. And sometimes those are the very people who do exactly that, not being good friends, doing abusive things, that they accused others of being. And those are the people sometimes we have the hardest time to let go of. And the more we invest in people who are toxic at worst, or not good friends in the very least, the longer we hang around with them, there's a psychological mechanism. The more you invest in someone, emotionally, time-wise, even financially for some people, the more we are unwilling to let go of them. We have too much at stake, we have too much invested in them. But sometimes those are the very people or circumstances that's time to declutter at this time of the year. And you don't have to necessarily do a big drama unless they make a drama and you say, okay, so far and no further. But you could just distance yourself. Sometimes, in fact, it's the easiest and best and most advisable way to declutter your stories. And those who impose their stories on you, such as toxic friends who insist that you be a good friend to them, though they are not a good friend to you, by just distancing yourself. There's a method, those of you who have looked into narcissism and narcissistic abuse, there's a method called gray rock. You just no longer respond emotionally to them because they feed on your emotions sometimes. And at the same time, there are other friends who are true friends, and perhaps we haven't given them enough attention, or we took them for granted. So that's part of our story decluttering as well. Take stock of your true friends and then people in your life that no longer serve who you are or never actually did and held you down, imposed their perhaps toxic, abusive view of onto you, guilted you into serving them emotionally or otherwise, and you really need to free up that space to be truly yourself again instead of being tied to that person. So that's a very important thing. On the topic of people, good friends you may have not given enough attention to, I just recently was digging through some bags, and I found a couple of items I had so missed, and I thought I didn't have them, and then they were there. I was happy to use them again and to have them part of my life, and they so much enriched my life, and I hadn't even remembered that I had those items. Well, what goes for items, not that people are things, of course, but even more so, sometimes people have come into our lives and we haven't given them the value and the attention they need. So that's another beautiful thing from decluttering. Shine up and use and give a special place to those things or even experiences and people in your life. Speaking of experiences, as much as we have regretted certain things and can rewrite them from a hero story, from someone who overcomes and rises above their challenges and failures. How about looking back? I think part of the decluttering process is polishing up the dull silver hanging around in drawers you had all forgotten. Why not bring them back and give them the special place? And so as well with certain experiences we had in our past. There's one exercise I often recommend to my clients, and that is to make a long line, and for every 10 years put like a vertical line, and then within 10 years write the major accomplishments or shifts that you have undertaken in those 10 years. What were some of the amazing experiences? And let it be like a vision board perhaps in front of your eyes, and fill in more and more. And that's kind of like polishing up the dull silver you have forgotten, but that's part of your possession and part of who you are. And I think it's such a beautiful part of the decluttering. The more you get rid of the things that no longer have never served you, and you need the courage to let go of them or rewrite them, there's also this other part where you let the beauty shine that you had almost forgotten, whether that's people, experiences, or moments that remind you of who you truly are. Write it down and write in the comments story if you want to know more about how to declutter your story. Before we go into the last area I want to address today in decluttering your story, I also want you to be aware that I work with people in particular in terms of branding who you are, whether it's a business or reinventing yourself, writing new stories and finding out who you truly are, shining up and polishing that diamond that you truly are, but that you may have neglected yourself, felt less than, felt even the imposter syndrome when you went for things you wanted to but felt inadequate. There's so many aspects of our stories that we, consciously or not, work with in our daily life. And so I help people with that, and I sent a link where you can find out more. Well, the third aspect I want to address today about decluttering your story deals with the future. See, as long as we haven't decluttered the past and the present of who we are and what our story is about, we tend to repeat the same patterns in the future. We've all heard it, whether it's in relationship, finances, or how we show up in life. We tend to repeat the same patterns. And that is often because we project into the future elements of the past or what other people told us we can or cannot be. And that often runs on a very subconscious level. And sometimes we block ourselves. And more about blocks, because I don't quite believe in money blocks and all that you need to ferret out and diffuse. I think the blocks are very valuable, actually. They're stepping stones, and in my program I talk a lot about that. So, for instance, you may have had people in your life who expressed a part of who you are in a negative way. And for that reason, you reject that part of yourself. And it holds you back from expressing yourself in the future. So decluttering your story also means decluttering the future you step into. For instance, someone who had a father who's a show-off and very kind of vapid, I know a client of mine, she had a father in his middle age who all of a sudden bought a proverbial Porsche, showed off, was, you know, on every party the one that was showing off as the hot man, even though he was no longer that hot in any case. And she was embarrassed by him. And underneath it, he or she perceived him as a failure. It was all air and nothing underneath it. You see, this lady whose father was this show-off, this kind of person she looked down upon, he was actually a celebrity archetype. The celebrities, like the name says, are celebrities or models that can show the rest of us the best version, the biggest, the up-leveled, it's been such a trendy word, be up-leveled version, but it can also be in its negative, in its blind spots, just be all foam and no substance. And so this lady held back her own future, her own success that she projected into the future by the story of her father. By the way, there's a very interesting thing I might dive into another time, borrowed memory that becomes our own memory. When I still was working in the cinema, I was writing on exile cinema and how people who had either immigrated to a new country or were born in a new country and whose parents were exiles or refugees, they had often borrowed the memory of their parents, of the past, of the other country, and made it their own, even though it was not really their own experiences. They borrowed the memory and it became part and parcel of their own story. And then oftentimes projected themselves as victims, when in reality they had no victim story themselves. going off on a tangent. There's also, of course, epigenetics. I'm not going to go into it at this particular moment, though so fascinating. So this woman whose father was such a show-off, she was a celebrity stylist in Hollywood, but her career just didn't take off. And as we dug deeper and as she took the prosperity personality quiz, turns out her main archetype, her main personality is that of the celebrity. And she hated it with a passion. She rejected her own potential. She rejected her own story. She rewrote her story by writing herself out of the picture where she could have been stepping into the heroine she really is. Why? Because she saw her father as the show-off with nothing behind it. And he was also the celebrity personality, and she rejected that with a passion. She did not want to be like her father. See, the interesting thing, of course, is when you declutter your own story, you can realize the celebrity archetype is an amazingly valuable archetype and personality. Just because her father had expressed it in a more negative way, she could express it in a positive way by bringing out the best, in herself, being a model, but being a model not as a runway model, but a model of bringing out the best of who she could be, and with her amazing ability to bring out the best in her clients as a celebrity stylist. She would turn them from frumpy into fabulous just because she had that celebrity style ability. And once we decluttered her story from her past and from her father, she now could step into the future story of herself, where she would embrace that and no longer reject her own story as the daughter of a father whom she rejected and who she did not want to be like. She polished up her own story, made it her own, and became the person she could be in her career and also in her personal expression and her branding, where previously she kept holding herself back because she had adopted someone else's story as hers. She felt if she would be the celebrity, she would be like her father, who she despised and felt he was empty and was a show-off and didn't care for the family, didn't have true values underneath it. She realized the positive aspect of her story really had great value and bringing out the best in others and herself, but in her case as a stylist, the best in others was very valuable indeed. It's like you polish up their story, their hidden gems, and make them shine and be their best. So rather than vapid or empty or useless, it was a very important and powerful way of rewriting who she could be by decluttering her own story, if you will. So, to recap, what are 3 stories in your past that you might have filled up with regret and failure emotions that you could rewrite? And again, one of the ways to do so, perhaps to get inspiration from books or YouTube videos where people have overcome that and actually made their blocks into stepping stones. 2, currently, how can you declutter your story by letting go of perhaps people who never served you as a true friend, who imposed their story on you to hold you back, or kind of almost held you captive by guilting you? What are some of the people, but also perhaps experiences that you can rewrite or let go of that are not conducive to who you are, to the story? Again, story is our identity. Yes, we have a true authentic identity given to us by God, by the Creator. But none of us is the same person from cradle to grave. In between that, the authentic self can be molded, shaped, and hopefully brought to its most exquisite expression by what we do with it. And what we do with it depends on the stories we tell ourselves. Stories are the alchemist, if you will, the chemical combustion that creates who you are from your talents that have been given to you and what you make out of it. Think of, even just in the Bible, the story of the 3 talents. There's the master who gives the first person 10 talents, and talents at that time was money, but also metaphorically the talents we carry. The other one 5 talents, and the third one 1 talent. And the master went away, and when he came back, he requested that all 3 servants would come to him and show what they did with their talents. So the first one, who had 10 talents, came and said, "Look here, I doubled it, and here is 20 talents." And the master says, "Well done, good and faithful servant. You have done well with what you've given. I give you double, because you have shown that you have developed yourself." The second one too, 5 talents. And it wasn't like, "Oh, you only got 5 talents." No, he proudly came and said, "Look here, I doubled it into 10 talents. And once again, the master was extremely pleased with him, and it wasn't a matter of the one having 10 talents and the other only 5 talents. There wasn't a jealousy that, "Oh, this person is much smarter or is much more gifted in music than I only have 5 talents." No, whatever you have, you create the best of it. And once again, the master was very pleased and doubled what he had. Well, when the last one came, he said, "I knew you were a strict master, and for that reason I buried my talent, and here it is back." And that servant was being told he was a mischievous and bad servant, and he didn't get double his 1 talent, but was dismissed. So this is why so many times people feel like, "Oh, I just want to be myself." But what is given to you as who you are yourself is the starting point into what you can make of yourself, develop the best of yourself, double, triple, and much more than that of your potential. Bring out the best potential in you, and the way to do so is, in a sense, the stories we tell ourselves, because that is how the human brain works, through language and through storytelling. So that's again a recap to our second way of decluttering your story. What are some ways you can let go of people who perhaps hold you back from developing who you really are, or impose their own story, a restrictive boxing story, or guilt you into a person. And it's really not just that you need to let go of them, but it's really to fulfill your highest expression, like the story of the talents. You have to declutter your story and let go of that. There are 3 people, experiences, even occupations. Perhaps you squander a lot of time on YouTube, or squander a lot of time with gossip or other things that you need to let go of in the present, so you can rewrite your story. And third one is the projection of your story into the future, because that's, of course, where we can really shine, by no longer letting old stories, or even stories that other people told us from the past, or that we interpreted one way about ourselves, hold us back, like this client, the stylist, who realized in order to be who she wanted to be, she would have to embrace the celebrity person that she was instead of rejecting it. And then she could declutter a story instead of seeing herself as a show-off. If she herself would be kind of a celebrity personality and help others be a celebrity personality. She embraced that because it was her biggest strength that she had rejected. So many times we reject our own strengths. And time to declutter so we can step into our best story that is yet to come and that we are shaping every day by the stories we tell of ourselves, of others, and our experiences. So I see you soon. Again, there's a link if you want to find out more about embracing who you truly are, whether it's a business or just for personal branding, to realize that there is so much more that you can become, and it's time to step into your best story. I see you soon. Bye.